Hi, everyone. It is Samantha with the NVLD project, and thank you all for joining us again for our March Facebook Live. I'm so excited to have two of our kind of newer ambassadors here with us today, Carolyn and Ellie, who we're going to just kind of chat with, do a little fireside chat. We've got a couple questions that we're going to talk about and some hot topics that we get asked about all the time. And then if you do have any questions or comments while you're watching this, as always, feel free to leave those in the comments below. We're more than happy to get to those at the end of our Facebook Live. So welcome, Carolyn, Ellie. Thank you both so much for joining us today. Now we've got a couple people that were sick and not feeling well that couldn't join us, so hopefully we'll get them on the next round. But I think let's start with some introductions. Let's tell people who you are. And Carolyn, we'll start with you only because you're on the top row in my screen. I don't know how this is showing up for everyone else, but yeah, if you just want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Carolyn Scourin. I am 27, almost 28, and I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I am a speaker and author, and I'm really passionate about talking about NVLD and ways to really help people feel less alone.
Amazing. And Ellie, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Ellie Pogash. I am currently 19, about to turn 20 in a month, and I am a freshman in college, and I am a advocate for mental health as well as NVLD, and I am trying my best to advocate and spread awareness about NVLD.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. We're so excited to have some new ambassador faces with us. We've had this program running for about 5 or 6 years at this point. So we always love to get some fresh perspectives and talk with new people and then have them out there advocating. And we've got you in two different parts of the country. So we've got people in Texas and Pennsylvania out there learning about NVLD. And Carolyn, you said you're a speaker, so I'm sure you're kind of talking in other places as well, which will lead me into my next question. I would love to know a little bit about your NVLD journey. So, how old when you were you when you were diagnosed? How did you find out that you had NVLD? Talk to me a little bit about growing up with NVLD. And I'll just let you guys, since there's just two of us, two of you, let's just kind of have it as a conversation and one of you go ahead and start for us.
I guess I'll start. I was actually diagnosed with NVLD when I was 16 years old, and I kind of grew up my whole life not knowing what it was that made me always feel different. And, internalizing situations is something that I would do as a kid, and it only got worse as I got older. But when I was 16 years old, I did a test to really figure out why I wasn't doing well in school, and that is what diagnosed me with NVLD. And when I first found out, I had never heard of it. So I was very confused. I was not in a good place mentally. So I was in a really depressed state. So when I found out, I kind of was like, wow, this makes me sound different. This makes me feel different. And no one's going to like me. People are going to judge me, all this stuff. And, the fact that we have the NVLD project now is so amazing because I wish that existed when I was 16 years old because it could have helped me so much.
Yeah, very cool. Ellie, what about you? How old were you when you were diagnosed?
When I was diagnosed, I was 12, and, I was always misdiagnosed my whole life. People around me and my mom would always say, because autism was the huge buzzword at the time. And, some parents would come up to my mom and be like, "Oh, is your daughter autistic?" And she would go, "No, I don't think so. I mean, it could be that, but I'm not sure." And when I was 12, I finally got diagnosed, and it felt like a weight was lifted off of my shoulders, and I felt like, "Oh, that's why my brain functions differently than others," and that's why I was always a weird child, and I sort of, you know, kept that to heart and made my weirdness who I am.
Jim. Yeah, so 7 years ago for you, Ellie, and then what is that, 12 years for you, Carolyn?
Yeah,
Yeah,
about
okay.
so I'm not good at
Yeah.
math, so you tell me.
I'm like thinking in my head, I'm like, she said she's 28.
It's gonna be 28, 27 right now though. So I guess you could say
Gotcha.
11.
Okay, okay. So both in your teen years, so you kind of had a time frame where you didn't have a diagnosis and didn't quite understand why things were more difficult or why you struggled with certain things when other kids didn't, but had, I always like to say, you guys have some really amazing strengths, and we're going to talk about some of those as well. So what was it like in elementary and kind of middle school before that diagnosis? I know, Ellie, you said that you always kind of thought of yourself as the weird kid, but did you find it hard to make friends? Were you, were you struggling with kind of that social aspect? What were some of the things that you struggled with that made you feel like there was something there that you needed a diagnosis for?
So when I was 7 in first grade, I had a teacher who was not very kind to me. And, because I always listened to my mom, and she would tell me just to take things slow, don't rush. I would always be the last one to finish a math test because, again, I have dyscalculia as well. So that kind of
Okay.
coincides with NVLD. And, I've been able to make friends really easily. It just takes me a little bit to get over that anxiety of going up to a new person. But in school, I was always the one that like played by myself, and you know, I would play with sticks a lot. So that was um my mom and my dad always thought that, I was different and weird in a great way. So they sort of had an idea that I was not any any normal person. Just didn't they just couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was.
Got it. And so at 12, did you take a neuropsych exam and that's how you got your diagnosis?
Yeah,
Okay.
and the funny thing is the person that, was taking my results was saying how in the 18 years that she's been working there, she's never seen a child as unique as me, and that really stuck with me, and I still remember it because my mom would always tell me that whenever the test was done, and she told me that, and I was like, "Wow," so I basically didn't fail the test.
Yeah. What about you, Carolyn?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I always grew up with this sense of like not fitting in because I got bullied from a young age and I didn't really have friends. It kind of was harder for me to make friends and to keep them as I was growing up. It kind of was like a very hard challenge. And once I got to high school, something I've always done since I was a kid was I worked 10 times harder as other people for half the result. And when I was finally in high school, that was kind of when I was like, I'm working so hard, I'm trying my best, and I'm failing these tests. And the thing was, is my parents, they did everything they could to help me and tried to get me a bunch of tutors, but it wasn't enough because I just wasn't, I was never good at science. I was never good at math. And I knew I never was going to be. But, just growing up, at least having the support of my family, like that definitely has always been something I've had the feeling of feeling different. They never have once made me feel bad about feeling different. They've always made me feel good about it. They always say, be different. You want to be different. You don't want to be following the crowd. And when I was younger, that concept didn't really hit in my head, but now I understand that, differences are a good thing. Differences make us unique. Differences are what make the world go round, and I think that as a kid, your brain's not fully developed till you're 25. So I wasn't thinking in that sort of way. I was kind of more thinking of like, I really hate this. I hate my life. No one wants to hang out with me. Sometimes I'd go to lunch and barely go to lunch. I'd just go to the bathroom crying because when I was in high school, I was like, why am I not connecting with these other kids and everyone else is?
Yeah. It sounds like you both have very supportive families who have kind of been there to help you learn how to accept those differences and kind of see them as strengths or learn to see them as strengths over time, because I know it does take a little bit of time for that, which I think is kind of a great segue. So we talked a little bit about like what you struggled with the most, but I would love to know, what do you think are your biggest strengths because of NVLD? And we get this question a lot from parents, we hear from adults, we get emails and messages all the time about, I'm really struggling, or my kid is saying this or feels this way. So I think speaking to the strengths and talking about kind of those superpowers is so powerful and helpful. Would love to know kind of your take and what you think are some of your biggest strengths because of it.
I guess my biggest strength would be that, and this is something people tell me all the time, is that I'm very empathetic in the
Mm.
sense of like, most people would not just drop everything for a friend who's in crisis, but me, I'm like, I'm driving over right now. So that's something that I do pride myself on, of just like being as kind and just as understanding as I can be. And I also think that, something that is a strength of mine is being able to communicate with people. Ever since I've been a kid, I've been able to talk to adults, and my parents were like, you can literally talk to even paint. So, and my dad was always like, I could never do that. So it was just like, he was like, it's really cool that you can. And so, again, something of being supportive family, making me feel good about that. And that was even before I was diagnosed with NVLD. But another thing that I really realized, and I realized this a little bit later in my life in my 20s, was that writing and being creative and taking my whole creative side out was something that I never knew existed. I found that I could write a song in 10 minutes, and most people can't do that. And I was like, that's actually really cool. That's a strength of mine because I just love the creativity. I love music and I love creating beautiful masterpieces, honestly.
Very cool. That's awesome. Ellie, what about you?
Same thing with creativity. I love creative writing. It's an outlet because I'm not really good at expressing my emotions. And with writing, every thought I have goes on a paper. And I get so many cool opportunities from that, as well as acting, because, I've been acting since I was young, and I just have this passion for it and this drive for it that I don't think a lot of people have, as well as, being empathetic towards others, and like feeling and loving very deeply because would I'm very much loyal to all my friends, and I would do anything for them, even if, they're miles away.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. And I think, Carolyn, you said something too, like just those diverse perspectives. We talked about it on our Facebook Live last month with Refocus from the UK in the workforce. We were talking about like how important it is to have people that think differently and solve problems differently. And I think that that is true in all aspects of life. I think having different perspectives in a classroom or when you're having conversations with coworkers or when you're talking to family and friends and kind of just chit-chatting and how that does create empathy and how that does create kind of an understanding of other people is being able to see those differences, consider them strengths, and really understand like why it is so important to have all those different kind of views. But I love that you guys both brought up empathy. I think that's such a good strength and one that we don't have on our list, and I might have to add. But I do think the creative outlet is such a common thread as well. We hear that all the time. People are in theater, they love to write, which is a big part of our ambassador program. It's one of the best outlets for people to kind of share their story. So yeah, I think that's really cool. And then talk to me a little bit about, I know you're not quite into adulthood, Ellie. You're still a freshman in college, but talk to me a little bit about what you're doing in college and what you hope to do afterwards. And then Carolyn, you can talk a little bit about kind of what you do as a speaker and how you're using that to advocate for NVLD. Would love to just kind of know like being an adult with NVLD. What does that look like?
So being someone that has NVLD, navigating life as a adult is very it's both difficult and also like super easy, I guess. With the way that, when I was a junior and senior in high school, would I was looking through colleges with my dad, and I had this strict rule of like I don't want to be far away because of my separation anxiety. And then I chose Southwestern, and it was like, okay, so I'm not going to be as far away from home. And I basically being a theater and English major really has impacted me because I wanted to be an actress for people because I didn't have that representation of an NVLD actor growing up, and I want to be that sort of person that any neurodivergent person can look up to and be like, anything is possible, and you can do anything you want with, even if this is even though you have a disability, that doesn't stop you from being, chasing your dreams. And I I also want to be an author and a writer when I grow up, and I would love to, you know, talk about, my story, and that's the reason why that I became an NVLD ambassador is because I want other people to realize that they're not alone and that, I'm doing this all for my 12-year-old self that would have loved to have this sort of outlet, and realizing that not everybody is going to have like same like no one's going to have the same brain.
Yeah, very cool. I love that. Well, it's perfect that you two are on this Facebook Live together. Then we've got an author, published author, and then a future author in our midst. So I love to hear that. But that's really cool, Ellie. Thank you for sharing. Carolyn.
So for me, yes, navigating NVLD in adulthood is something I constantly have to be aware of. I
Mhm.
think one of the biggest things about having NVLD and something I've found is being self-aware. So noticing when I'm starting to spiral or noticing when I'm like, I'm thinking of, of some task and then think of another task and then think of everything I have to do and then trying to organize it because that is something I still constantly struggle with. And my friends would say too, I need a whole block to parallel park. So like that's something that will constantly be, a part of me. But the thing I realized about NBLD and adulthood is you get to choose who you be around. So you get to choose supportive people to understand that you have this learning disability, and yet it doesn't affect who you are as a person or how you are as a friend. And I think that is like the most amazing thing ever because I think that, publishing my first book, I think it's really cool that Ellie said she wants to be a writer because, that's the other thing too, though, is writing is a great outlet. Not only writing songs, but writing for me has always been something I never realized was actually like my biggest strength. And I love it because it just is a really great outlet for me. And it's something that I love talking about because I wrote this book to help one person to share my story and to help people realize that they are not alone. They are going to be okay, whatever it is they're going through, whether you find out you have a diagnosis, whether you're struggling with anxiety or depression, whatever it is, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that that's the thing about adulthood is like there is that light at the end of the tunnel. And so when you're a kid and you have NBLD and you're struggling in school and you're not doing as well as everyone else and you're like, oh my gosh, this is awful. But then when you get to adulthood, you really actually thrive because you are able to talk to people and you are also able to just really create this life for yourself that you want because I'm also a public speaker and I go to high schools and colleges, middle schools, whoever really needs it, and I talk to them about adaptability, positivity, and resilience because that is something that I have had to incorporate in my life, and it took me a really long time to understand that that has really shaped a lot of who I am today.
Yeah. Very cool. And one of the things I noticed when you're both talking is having that outlet, having a way to express your feelings, whether it's talking to someone, it sounds like it's writing for both of you. Ellie, it's probably on stage. You can express a lot of emotion on stage, but kind of having an outlet to help you express your emotions in a way that isn't just through facial expressions or talking to someone, but really kind of putting pen to paper, getting on stage, that kind of thing. I think that's really wonderful that you've both found that outlet and that way to share how you're feeling and kind of share your story with each other. Um, okay. So I know that we sent this in an email and we've been posting some of these on Instagram, but I would love to hear what is the one thing, if you could tell everybody or anybody you met one thing about NVLD that you want them to know and understand, what would that be?
For me, that would definitely be that NVLD does not mean that I can't talk. I've gotten a lot of people being like, "Oh, but you talk so well," and I go, "No, it's nonverbal communication, like body language, facial expressions, social cues." And, with the NVLD project having, a new sort of name for it, would be one of the, like, greatest things to happen because then people won't get confused with that,
Mhm.
and, in the future, people will realize that, oh, it's about visual, spatial, and, you know, different types of communication that we do on a daily basis.
Yeah. And just to reference what Ellie is talking about, our DSM proposal to include NVLD in the DSM is also suggesting the name change to developmental visual spatial disorder, to pull out, to say what the disorder is, not what it isn't. So when you say nonverbal, people do seem to think, and we get a lot of emails about, children being mute and that kind of thing, but we are suggesting that they change the name to developmental visual spatial disorder to help actually clarify what it is and not what it isn't. So, all right, Carolyn, what about you?
The biggest thing I think I would want people to understand is that having NVLD does not define you. It is a part of your story, it is a part of who you are, but that's not all I am. You are more than your weaknesses. You are more than those things that you tell yourself when you're self-doubt and when you spiral and all of that, because there's so many good things that actually can come of this. And it's important to focus on the strengths, the things that are, now I see it as, my strengths are my superpower. So it's about finding your superpower and understanding that that's okay and that's how it's supposed to be, and really accepting the fact that I don't have to be like everybody else, because at the end of the day, it would, like I said earlier, it would just be boring if we were all the same. And having these differences make us cool to talk to, like, you're talking to other people who have NVLD and then other people who don't have NVLD. And it's like, everyone just like has a different mindset, a different way of thinking about things. So, I think that's the biggest thing though, is like your, weaknesses are not going to take away from your strengths, because you still are a competent person.
Absolutely. Love that. Cool. Well, we've kind of run through all of my questions that I have. I'm gonna check Facebook really quick to see if we've had any comments. I'm gonna do it on my computer, so give me just 1 second. I can't always see them on my phone. See, we've got comments on the computer and I did not see these on my phone. Okay. Um, Okay, we have a comment asking about if you can talk about math and NVLD. And I believe this might be geared towards you, Ellie, because I know you mentioned this calcula. Were you in an inclusion classroom or separate for math? And I guess maybe, how did you work on that? What advice do you have? And then Carolyn, if you also have some advice on handling math. I'm assuming this is probably for like a daughter or son that's maybe in high school or something, but.
Oh, math for me has always been like a villain in a superhero movie. It's basically when you have dyscalculia, it's like math dyslexia. You look at the paper that they give you, like, for example, if it's a multiplication chart, and it's all jumbled, and everything and you're spiraling, and I've even, like, cried over math because of how hard it is for me to understand the math concepts. And with NVLD combined with it, it's like 10 times worse. So what I've learned to do is, you know, always like I even have a fear of asking for help, but once you get that courage, just ask for help from a teacher. And I was lucky enough to go to a private school for kids with the different learning disabilities, and the teachers there were just so sweet, and they were able to help me through my math career there and be able to like I was able to sort of understand the concepts more instead of, you know, being told that, you know, I'm like dumb. And you know, math, it can either be like, eh, and I would always be jealous of people in my class that would always understand the math concepts, and it would just take me a little bit slower and longer to fully understand and grasp those concepts.
Yeah. So you said you went to a private school. Okay, so you
Yes.
had teachers that were working a little bit, probably smaller class sizes and a little more kind of one-on-one attention.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you. Carolyn, what about you? I know that you said you also went to, was it a private school?
So I started in public high school, and I was taken out of my algebra class and put into remedial math. But then once I eventually went to another school, so I ended up going to boarding school when I was 16, and it was for kids with like different learning disabilities, nonverbal, ADHD, like whatever it was. And it was really nice because, you know, as much as I hated math, I had this really great teacher my junior year, and he was like also my like house parent, which is like boarding school. He's like the one that like, you know, basically has supervision over the kids every time. But it was just, you know, I just remember I would not get concepts, but like he would help me a little bit understand. But trust me, we've all been there for crying over math because it's hard, you know, it's not something that comes naturally to me. And, you know, like even with like tip and stuff, I still use a calculator. I will always use it with calculator, and I'm no shame in that. But I just yeah, like I've done remedial math, but I've also done more one-on-one attention, you know, 6 people in a class rather than, you know, 20. And it's made a huge difference. But I definitely have been someone where if everyone's learning chapter 1 today, I'm not going to learn everything. They're going to be on chapter 3 and I'm going to still be on chapter 1. So it's just kind of like the pace. I didn't really fit the pace, but I think that's the thing too. I think there should be a pace for everyone, you know, because not everyone learns at the same speed. And I think that that should be normalized and okay, especially in public schools too, because I realized that, you know, my boarding school, I was really, you know, grateful to have that for kids with learning disabilities, but the care for learning disabilities at my public high school, you know, I was in remedial math, but I didn't really have many accommodations, which is something with NVLD that you might need.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Let me double check our Facebook one more time to see if there's any other comments. It looks like that is it. We've had quite a few people watching compared to what we normally have live. But like I said at the beginning, we might have some more questions pop up in the comments of our Facebook. So if you want to check Facebook maybe later tonight or tomorrow morning, if not, I'll send some of those over to you so that you can kind of answer those. Sometimes I'll go in and answer if I feel comfortable with that. But I know on this one, they'll probably be a little more personal about just your experience with NVLD, which I think is what's great about these Facebook Lives is instead of just talking to professionals, we're talking to people that actually have these lived experiences and deal with NVLD on a daily basis and know the strengths and struggles and the ins and outs of it. So I think that's really wonderful. And I appreciate both of you being so open and sharing your experiences with us today. And I will end the way I normally end, which is if you could give one last piece of advice to your younger self, since you both have talked about your younger selves today, that's how we'll end this. If you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would it be?
I guess, you know, 12-year-old me was really insecure about her diagnosis and realizing that she was different. And, you know, my advice to her is that resilience is key. You're still going to love 80s movies, and that's never going to change. And, you know, I'm literally wearing a Goonies shirt right now. So that's how you know. And to always, you know, that even that even though you're gonna have some friendships fall apart, you always get back up and you keep on going because life is too short to worry about other people. And, you know, I think my 12-year-old self would be proud of how far I've come and, being able to go to college and actually thrive and be in an environment where there's small class sizes and, just living living life as any other person would. But I think my advice I would give is that resilience and that, anxiety is a monster sometimes, and you're gonna overcome that, but there are gonna be some days where you struggle with your NVLD, where you think, "Oh my gosh, I wish I didn't have it," but then those thoughts go away and you realize that NVLD is not a blessing or a curse, it's a superpower, and it's something that we all struggle with, and it's something that we also all cherish about ourselves. And if I had known there were other people with NVLD who were just like me, I think I would've bawled over how I I'm not alone. So, yeah.
Very cool. Thank you, Ellie. Carolyn.
So I think the biggest thing I would say is I would tell, this is more for my 16-year-old self, but I would really just say you don't know how good you are and you don't know how good you're gonna be because, self-doubt, self-deprecation was something that I did a lot on in high school, especially because, like I said, internalizing was something that I kind of struggled with. And, it's still something constantly I have to like be aware of when I am doing it. But really kind of just understanding that, you have to believe in yourself and you have to know that this learning disability is only going to help you find your passion. It's only going to help you find what you really want in life. I never in a million years would have seen myself as an author, but when I wrote my book, that kind of was something where I was like, 16-year-old me would be like, how did we do this? And the title of the book is actually Unbreakable because I'm unbreakable. So it kind of was like a little homage to like, all the things that I've gone through and all the ages I've been through. It just shows, I'm unbreakable, even going through, even finding I had a learning disability and everything I have gone through. It's only made me stronger and it's only made me more resilient. So I think the biggest thing I would say is just, don't doubt yourself. Don't keep questioning, am I going to be good enough? Because you are, and you are always have been. And also too, I would say like, talk to your parents more about your feelings because when I was 16, I definitely like, did not talk all the time to my family, or even like my sister, she was, someone too that I should have talked to a lot more, but I'm very lucky now because I have all of them and they have been extremely helpful in, navigating this journey. And, my sister Jordan is everything to me. And I would really tell myself to be like, make sure you're working on your relationship with your sister too, because one day you're going to be best friends. And all that matters at the end of the day is being yourself. The right people will find you.
Very cool. Well, thank you both. Carolyn will drop a link in the comments to your book so that people can look it up and possibly read it. And then also Ellie will be waiting for your book in the future. So we've got
Yes.
all authors here. So that's really awesome. But thank you both so much for your kind of vulnerability, for sharing your stories today, and for joining us for our ambassador chat. It was good to have new faces. We're so excited to, have you guys on board and helping advocate and just spread the word so that people do know what NVLD is and can better understand it, soon to be hopefully DVSD. But yeah, thank you both for joining today.